technicians will need to work with their employer to decide what they can do with it. That said, I think it's really important for employers. Managers I know who their rock stars are, but use that data to go and make the case internally for retaining those people. There's going to have to be a culture change here in order to see a correction. In fact, there's an opportunity here for hospitals.
Rising above the buzz of ultrasonic cleaners and the clanking of stainless steel are the ideas and voices that are changing an industry. You're listening to the Beyond Clean podcast, the central nexus for the people, processes, and products that are improving our sterile processing world. Each week, we speak with frontline technicians, CEOs, engineers, and entrepreneurs with a common goal to help you fight dirty every instrument, every time. Whether you are tuning in for education or inspiration, we're glad you did. Now turn on those washers and turn up the volume. It's time to go Beyond Clean.
We are going to be speaking in just a few minutes with Seamus Johnson. He's an innovation team leader at Censis Technologies. We are going to be coming at a conversation about measuring productivity. Not really, but taking the data that we can get on individual technicians or ourselves doing our jobs and using that to make a case for retention, making a case for productivity, making decisions around how to staff the department. And Hank, I'm really excited for this one because I think people are going to start hearing about what's truly possible with the data that we're already collecting today, but how underutilized that information has been to date.
Yep. Every one of us in the industry, Justin, have had to create a resume, and you've probably been looking at that resume and thinking, what does this actually tell the hiring manager about me outside of like what my job responsibility was at this hospital? But how good of a technician was I? How productive? How good was my quality? What percentage of the work did I do myself versus all of my other counterparts? That data is possible today, and we're going to get deep into this interview with Seamus today, talking about how you can leverage it, not only as an individual, but also how hiring managers can be smarter and be better advocates for how they keep those high performers.
Yeah. You know what? Data like that looks great on a resume. The last thing you want to do is list the things that you are supposed to do in your job role. What you should be listing is what you're actually doing and what you have done to contribute outside of the lines of the job description to make the organization better. If you want to get an interview and you want to get hired, that's how you do it. We're going to talk about how to do it with data with Seamus Johnson. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm Justin Poulin.
And I'm Hank Balch.
From 17 Studios, you're listening to Beyond Clean, the global voice of sterile processing.
We are speaking with Seamus Johnson, Innovation Team Leader at Censis Technologies, and we're kicking off this season. We're going to be talking about professional development in a lot of different ways, but specifically for this conversation, we're going to be talking about building a resume that counts. I love to play on words, Hank. You know, you're so creative with the titles. I love it. And we're going to define a little bit more about quality data that you can leverage as a leader or a supervisor in a sterile processing department to help you stand out. And so, Seamus, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
All right. So tell us something before we ask you to give us more of the this is what I do. Tell us something interesting about yourself.
Interesting about myself. I grew up without a TV. How about that?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
All my pop culture references are not going to fly on this interview.
100%. I got to first grade, and this kid said to me, he was very proud. He said, "I have Prince Adam." And I was like, who the heck is Prince Adam? He-Man's alter ego, from years ago. But I had no idea who that was. Yeah. No, we were moving around when I was a kid. And we just didn't have. We had when we were back in Iowa. We had one of those great big TVs, with the wood paneling on the side and all that kind of stuff. And we moved down here so my dad could go to Vanderbilt and lived in student housing, like no room for that kind of stuff, and got rid of it. And my parents just decided they got used to it, and they figured it was better for us kids not to have TV, and so we didn't.
So when was the first time you owned a TV in any capacity?
So for my 16th birthday, my dad got me a little tiny black and white. I mean, it was like 4 inches TV. I could get 2 channels. I could get PBS and Fox. So I've seen about every episode of The Simpsons, Star Trek Next Generation, everything that was that generation in the 90s. I watched all of it.
On a 4-inch black and white. Now everybody's watching it on a 4-inch, cell phone that's just so crazy.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because now you spend a lot of your time in front of a monitor. So I wonder if there's any correlation there.
I hope not.
Well, all right. So tell us what you do. I introduced you as the innovation team leader at Censis. And so you had said, I've got lots of different roles. And if anybody looks up on LinkedIn, it may say, something like developer, but really you're doing a lot of things to influence the direction of the company. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been here at Censis for about 20 years now. I started in 2003, itty bitty company at the time. We had 1 paying customer when I got here. And for most of that time, I was a software developer. I wrote the code that's behind SensiTrack. A few years ago, they asked me to lead the development team. And then after that, they asked me to help lead this new innovation team. And really what we do is we go out and we talk to our customers and we try to understand what are their biggest challenges that we could and should try and help solve for them. And so that's what we do.
Excellent. Well, I think we're at a point, and, you've really seen this over 20 years. I would say the adoption of the technology has been slow historically. And now we're hitting this tipping point where there's enough data where we can really leverage it. And part of having that data is also, like you talked about, to innovate, you need feedback. Well, if we've only got 10% adoption of tracking systems in hospitals across the US, it doesn't really help us a ton, right? And so with wider adoption, we can now go to an advanced level. So what kind of technician specific data is possible to capture, instead of just load and time and, do we have the right instruments in the sets? What are we learning about the people in the department?
So in a nutshell, what we can see in the data is people matter, and they matter a lot. To put this in context, as long as I've been here, our customers have been saying it's hard to hire people in sterile processing. There's a lot of turnover. But the last 3 years, it's been dialed up to 11. With the pandemic, they furloughed a lot of technicians. A lot of folks left the industry. Wages in other sectors have gone up. So it used to be that getting a job in sterile processing was a step up, right? But today you've got companies like Target and Walmart and so on that are paying wages that are competing for those same people, right? And you get to work indoors in air conditioning. So that's a big deal. So we've been trying to help our customers solve this problem. And in doing that, we're understanding how much people matter. So when we look at the data, for example, we can see that your top technicians are processing 3, 4, 5 times as many trays as other technicians. They're making fewer mistakes because they're proficient with the instrumentation. They know their stuff, right? But they don't get paid 3, 4, 5 times as much. It makes economic sense, right? If you think about it, what is sterile processing supposed to do? Fundamentally, get the stuff sterilized, get it sterilized correctly, and get it to the OR on time. If that's what they're doing, and they're doing more of it than other people, they're worth more than other people. I mean,
You're singing my song.
It's a big problem, I think. And I think it's cultural as much as anything, because you've got an HR department that says, well, this is what the market rate is for this position. I can't support paying 5 times that, Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a conversation that we've had For the past 5.5 years of Beyond Clean, and obviously throughout my career, I've been an advocate for looking at the data and comparing it to that compensation question that you mentioned, and doing so in a creative way, right? So yeah, maybe we can't pay them 3 to 5 times as much as what their peers are, but can we do something different than just pay everyone the same? Or at the very least, can we acknowledge what the data is saying and the value of these individuals that, either due to natural skill or to training or to ongoing education and competencies, for whatever reason, they have gotten to where they are today, that they're bringing that weight of productivity. And I also really appreciate that you gave a shout out, and they're also not making as many errors, right? Because that's a constant battle. And that's a discussion that you often see out there in the industry around those two tension points. But as Justin alluded to today, like, we've had access now to data for a couple of decades. Like you mentioned, 20 years, right? Censis has been out there providing this, and there's competitors all over the market today that are also trying to get at this data and provide efficiencies and transparencies. But we're finally at that tipping point that I feel like now we've got enough adoption and enough data that can drill down to that technician level, that not only can the department start making decisions around this and compensation, et cetera, but now the individual can say, hey, wait a second, you've got data on me. It's like that little baseball card, right? For baseball players, and like, you got a baseball card on me and I got metrics. And I'm really curious, since you're the data guy, like, what kind of those metrics can and should these individuals now be getting access to? Going back to our other piece, to eventually have this compensation argument, either when they're getting hired or when they're potentially getting promoted. Talk us through those data points, if you will.
Yeah. So a couple things. I think fundamentally it's productivity numbers, which all the tracking systems collect. Censis in particular has a report geared towards the technician where you can pull your own numbers. All right. And then quality metrics. How many mistakes do you make per 1,000 trays, right? And a couple things on that. One, we can see that best of best technicians are below a 0.5% error rate. That's 5 trays out of 1,000 trays turned have a mistake. There was always this question for us about what's the trade-off between productivity and quality. Like, if you just go faster and faster, surely you're going to make mistakes, right? And what we can see when we look at large samples of data is that, yes, when people rush, they do make mistakes. But the relationship between those two isn't as clear cut. What we find is that over time, there is a strong degree of correlation between productivity and quality. They go hand in hand. As technicians get better in terms of productivity, they also tend to get better in terms of quality. And the reason is because they're not pushing their productivity numbers up by like pacing themselves with a stopwatch or having a manager stand over them and try to go as fast as possible. They're getting better in terms of productivity because they're getting better with the instrumentation. They're learning the instrumentation, right? And that's what drives quality as well. So we talk about productivity, we talk about quality as metrics to track, but I think you should also look at, your breadth of knowledge. Look at the array of instrumentation that you are proficient with. There are reports in Censis that can help you get that today. How many different unique kinds of trays did I turn this month, for example?
Yeah, huge. Because if you're sitting there, and this is a great segue into my next question. If you're sitting in an interview and you've got, this productivity data that you mentioned, you got this quality data that you mentioned, now you've got this scope and breadth of exposure into certain service lines or certain kinds of trays, or even certain kinds of complexity of trays. Now you're sitting there potentially with someone else who interviewed before you, and, they got the resume and they've got all of this information that has nothing to do with actually how good they are in the department, how productive and how qualitative are and everything else. It's just like, I've worked at this other place for 5 years. or I've worked at this other place for 10 years and this is how many ORs they have. And this is how many like cases they're doing every day. Well, that doesn't tell you anything about the technician that's sitting in front of you today. And then here I am with a resume that's got all that data that you said, that not just general data on the department, but this is Hank's data. And this is how fast I'm going in it. And then I know all these open heart trays, that I know all these orthopedic trays. And not only that, that I'm doing 30% of the production of my team on a weekly basis. Now, that is the kind of information that as a hiring manager, I'm like, okay, now we're cooking, because you're not just sitting here, answering questions with some good answers or creative answers, but now I've actually got some hard data to back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, another thing that technicians should keep in mind too is that when they go to apply for a job, almost every hospital out there has open recs for people. So you have some leverage. It's not just you versus somebody else. It's entirely possible you're the only person applying for this job. Know what you're worth. If you look at other industries like construction, somebody who's a welder comes in, they might demonstrate their welding skill and get different rates or offers based on how good they are, right?
Yeah, I've seen those videos.
Yeah, and it makes total sense, right? Sterile processing is a very technical job, and there's a lot riding on it. There is no reason why you shouldn't have that same kind of standard in sterile processing, right?
So the question for me is, and this comes up a lot, who owns the data? So on the one hand, the technician could leverage that data to go find another job, but does that data belong to the facility so that it's not really that technician's to share, right? And secondly, as we kind of follow up on that, how much visibility is there going to be? And is it good for the department to not cross-train other people and allow somebody who's like really good at ortho to only do ortho? Because what kind of thinking about how they take this data and put their strategic plan together. And that strategic plan is not only staff assignments, but also, employee retention.
Yeah. So a bunch of things there. First off, I think, well, number one, the hospitals do own their data, at least for Censis. So, technicians will need to work with their employer to decide what they can do with it. That said, I think it's really important for employers, managers I know who their rock stars are, but use that data to go and make the case internally for retaining those people. There's going to have to be a culture change here in order to see a correction. In fact, there's an opportunity here for hospitals. Every hospital that I talk to, like I said, has open recs in SPD. They all have pressure to get stuff turned. The hospitals that succeed are going to be the ones that are innovative in this area and find a way to get an advantage over the competition and retain top talent here, right? So look at this data, use it to understand with numbers who your rock stars are, evangelize for them internally. Make the case to retain those people. It makes a huge difference.
I don't need, one body to replace this body. And this has come up on a recent episode in the last season. I don't need one body to replace this body. Based on my average metrics, I actually need two people to replace this person.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge practical call out, Justin, because we've talked before, even about the years of experience, right? Like you look at just the body count, or the head count, I guess you should say. And you get turnover and you lose a 20-year veteran and you replace them with a 1-year student. That's great that you got new blood coming in, but you've just lost 20 years of experience and now you're in the deficit for 19 years. That's the kind of data point that, really gets lost in the HR calculations. And definitely when you're talking about, hey, what's that productivity value? Because it's not just times 1 or times 2. To your point, it could be a factor of 5 that now you're supplanting there, or you're replacing it with that new tech. So,
and the team knows.
Yeah.
So, if human resources really cares about culture, there's another component there that everybody knows that they lost somebody who was carrying more than their own share of the weight.
Yeah. We can see in data that turnover drives turnover as well. To your point, right? When you show up to work in SPD and 3 people have called out, that puts pressure on you. That drives burnout, right? Which leads to more turnover, So, making a focused effort to retain top performers, build a strong core in your SPD and keep it goes a long way to reversing that trend. You can get a positive reinforcement cycle out of that if you really work at it and like I said, evangelize internally, retain the best talent. It can make a huge difference.
Are you telling us now, Seamus, that there's data out there, that there's reports that can be put together that I can bring to my HR rep and say, hey, if we lose somebody right now, or if we lose this person who just came to me and said they've got a competitive offer, if we lose them, this is what we should expect. Do we have that kind of data at scale? Like, we may not have it in a particular department, but at scale, we can say, hey, industry trends say you lose 1, you're going to lose 3.
Yeah. It's not quite as clear cut as that, but what you can see is that both, in the data, and we know it anecdotally, right? But in the data, that as turnover numbers go up, they tend to escalate, right? And as turnover numbers go down, they de-escalate at the same time. So, yeah, absolutely.
So I want to go back to this practical scenario that I mentioned earlier. So we're sitting in there in that interview office, and there's a resume that's in front of you as the hiring manager. What's the most effective way, or what are some options out there for visualizing this data in a way that, it's going to catch the manager's eye, or it's going to be simple to understand for HR? Like, how would you propose as the data guy to put that together?
That's a great question. I can tell you what our customers focus on, which they tend to focus without a lot of education. By education, I mean helping them understand how, with the interactions between productivity and quality, they tend to focus on those 2 first. How many trays do you turn in a day? How many mistakes do you make out of every 1,000 trays? Right? And that's huge. Where I think we have an opportunity is to help them understand the degree to which proficiency with instrumentation drives both of those, and how the investment in people pays off. So if you think about sterile processing technicians as, well, I can bring anybody into the department and teach them how to do the job, and in 6 months they'll be proficient, and that's the end of the story, then you're really missing out. It takes a long time to reach those high levels of proficiency. It's like any profession that's very technical. There's 1 million different kinds of instruments in the world? Probably. I don't know. It's a lot.
Right.
It takes a long time to learn all that stuff and learn how to clean it, and learn where to look for defects, and learn where to look for bioburden to be hiding, or cement, or any of these other things, right? And so, if you take the time to understand the data around your technicians, understand where they have opportunities for growth, work with your educator to put together targeted plans for your technicians, that pays off huge, because you really could go from taking somebody who's a 1X technician and eventually growing them to be a 5X technician.
And that's the cheapest way, right? Then getting 5 other technicians. Just invest in that 1 technician and then 5X their output and their quality. I mean, that's just like, low-hanging fruit, right?
Yes. So I think on the resume, they like to see, I would think they would like to see that, yeah, you crank out a lot of sets and you don't make any mistakes. But behind that is your breadth of knowledge and experience, your mastery of the instrumentation. And for people running sterile processing, understanding where your technicians are on that path, knowing how to help grow your team is huge. So, even going a step up from that, when you look at your supervisors and your managers, are they the kinds of people that can grow a team? Can they understand how to, invest in the technicians?
Yeah. Yeah, that's critical, because we talked before in previous episodes, traditionally the folks who end up in those supervisor manager roles have just been great techs, and because they're great techs, they get promoted. but no one's really stopping and asking, hey, like, you're great tech, but can you create other great techs, to your point? And can you leverage data to make strategic decisions that impact your team? And so that's a fantastic call out. I want to go back, to that proficiency comment, because it actually gets me to my next question. If I'm the technician, I'm sitting here, maybe I'm not applying for a job yet, but I know, hey, in 2 years, I want to grow. What data points should I be looking at cultivating or, getting or asking for my manager that I can get access to or kind of see that it would be most helpful to me to prepare me to be that ace that I want to be in 2 years when I sit down with my resume and all these metrics are ready to go? Like, what should I be learning from the data today?
Yeah, I can tell you about the data. What it tells us is like I said, if you look at the number of different types of trays, unique types of trays that a technician processes on a regular basis, there's a strong correlation between that and their quality and their throughput. So if you're a technician and you want to grow, it's about learning more instrumentation and really learning it. So look at I would say, look at your quality rates on the instrumentation that you do today. And then look, can you do better? Look at the kinds of mistakes you're making, find ways, little ways. It's like stacking paper, right? One little thing, two little things, it doesn't look like the stack's very high, but after 100 things, you can see a big difference, right? So look at those little things about how to improve there. And then how do you expand your repertoire? Look to see if you can take on more sets. Don't be afraid of those, high complexity sets, the big sets, the vascular sets, the eye sets, things like that. Constantly challenge yourself and push yourself to learn more and more and more.
All right. So here's the next level for this. And I'm really interested to see how far away we are from it as we're kind of wrapping up the interview. Certifications is a big thing, right? There's a big movement to get that to be required in many states across the country. There's also, like how impactful is training, right? On an individual. And I mean, specifically, like, are they even trainable? This is something that you don't learn until you have, people on your team. And so, how impactful or even the design of the training program that's intended to get them to a certain level of proficiency, right? And teasing that out. So how far away are we from being able to take this data and say, the certification process or the certification itself gets us from point A to point B faster, or typically in that 2-year time frame gives us somebody who's much more prepared than somebody without certification, which would certainly, data like that would help requiring certification efforts across the country. And then secondly, just taking a look at our training programs, could we tease out, is it the person who's conducting the training? Is it the program itself, or is it the individual that's receiving the training and giving us some real guidance on personnel management that way, and then tailoring any additional follow-up? How far are we from that?
Well, the technology exists today to do all of that. And the data exists in large organizations already to do all of that. It's a matter of analyzing the data. So if you wanted to know, for example, what kinds of training programs or education programs are most effective, I know the data exists. We've got to go and do the work to analyze it. So that's probably the long pole. I think. So
the real issue is how costly would it be? It's not can we do it? It's how many, what is the cost in terms of dedicated resources and potentially outsourced costs to get resources to do it? That's really the issue. It's not can we do it? It's there today. It's can we afford to do it?
I mean, I think it's a gold mine just waiting for somebody to go and tap, right? Because let's just say hypothetically, you went and you analyzed, a whole bunch of training data, and you found that, look, if you implement a training program like this leads to, on average, a 50% improvement in quality and productivity over a 6-month period. That kind of training program would spread across the industry like wildfire, right? So I think it's just a matter of time. I think more than anything, there's a cultural change that has to come. I think, when I talk to people across the industry, when I talk to managers in particular, there are some out there that are data heads, that They love the data. They love looking at the data and using it to make decisions. But I don't think that they're in the majority. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think there's still, a cultural component there, in terms of data fluency that's needed.
Maybe that's the training program we need first, and then evaluate the effectiveness of the training program on, data fluency and putting it into practice.
Yeah. Something to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just a great interview. Hank, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever really tackled this conversation from this angle in any way other than kind of earlier when we were just talking about maybe that pay for performance model and the value of one individual to an organization instead of just everybody gets treated equally, especially when you're talking about these staffing concerns and understanding the impact of a loss of an employee. We've touched on that, but we've never gone into, really trying to hone in on how can we help people the quickest and most effective way, and how can we also take that data? Because I wonder when you say cultural shift, even if we have the data, we're not making all the decisions, right? Human resources making decisions.
Yes.
C-levels making decisions.
Yes.
Whoever, if you're reporting to supply chain or the operating room or infection prevention, they're making decisions in many cases too. And depending on their particular area of focus and methodology, it influences how that decision gets made. I feel like if we could get a little bit further down the road with some of this, that's the kind of transformational and cultural change that gets driven from that. So you really gave us a lot of food for thought here.
Yeah. So I went and I put exactly this question to an SPD manager. This was probably 6 months ago. And I said, look, I can see in your data that this person here is just absolutely killing it. In order to retain that person, why not pay them, X amount more or something like that? And his response was essentially, HR won't let me do that. If they have the same job title as everybody else, I have to keep it within this range, and my hands are tied. I would love to do it, And I said, well, why not create a different title?
Bonus program or even a bonus program? When you hit these, you've got to hit them all, but when you do, there's a substantial bonus in it for you. Like maybe the comp model baseline is the same, but the bonus program, there's no reason you can't do a bonus program.
Absolutely. I think hospitals that are willing to innovate here can solve this problem. It's a huge problem. If you think about it, SPD is the engine of the operating room, which is the economic engine of the hospital, right? If you choke the engine, you don't get any horsepower, right? So, and then that's where a lot of hospitals are today. You can't grow your procedure volume without nurses and sterile processing techs. So innovate and solve that problem, and you'll outperform everybody else.
Yeah. I like that engine reference too, because if you flood the engine, it's also not going to perform correctly, which is, I would say akin to let's just throw a bunch of bodies at it, which we don't have now because of Target and everything else, like you said. But we were flooding the engine before and not getting optimal performance. Now you're choking the engine and you're not getting optimal performance. It's how do we hone this and get the right level of performance. So, and fine tune that engine. Great analogy, Seamus. And thanks so much for coming on the show. Great interview.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Talking quality data, but at the technician level, which could potentially help you build your resume, Hank, but it also could help you establish value in the department. And even if your manager already knew, maybe it can put some meat behind their advocacy for you. Great conversation with Seamus Johnson, innovation team leader at Censis Technologies. And as we were kind of wrapping up, I was mentioning, I don't know that we've ever come at this topic quite like this. And I love, Hank, that you went after it to say, let's really just talk about technician specific metrics. And then what can we do with that strategically? Interesting to note that pretty much other industries may already be doing it. And the things that we would like to do with this data is already doable. It's just using it and getting us there.
I mean, it was really interesting, Justin, how the interview went into the staffing conversation, because originally that wasn't in my vision for the conversation. But obviously, if you're talking about resumes and hiring and really standing out as a technician in that space, you're going to be talking about, hey, what's going on in staffing these days? And I had not considered the impact of this data on just the bottom line of these departments. Like, you got someone that's processing 3 times as many trays or 5 times as many trays, and what that means for the finances, what that means for the headcount, and then how that data can be used then to add value to that individual in the interview process, or maybe in the, hey, I got a competitive job offer process, and now what are you going to do about it? And as we discussed at the end of that interview, sometimes there's not a lot today that health systems are willing to do. That doesn't mean they can't do it. But it all comes down to data, because in the past, like, we kind of go to HR and be like, hey, this person is really, really important. If we lose them, it's going to suck. And they're like, yeah, but do you have any numbers to prove that? And we're like, no, but trust me, we don't want to be here. Now we do. We've reached that tipping point. The data's there. And if it's our department data, we just need to hit run report and then march our happy little butts right up to the CFO.
We touched on the idea of how to take the data and make some decisions around, do we take the people and keep them where they're strongest and silo them in it? And then what does that potentially bring in terms of risk for the department and its ability to do day to day? How do we make sure people get cross-trained? We didn't dive real deep into that, but I can see this as, 2 years from now, focusing in once maybe there's more adoption on collecting this type of data. Like, can we get those insights? I'd love to have a conversation around that, is literally setting up the design of who works where on the day-to-day activities, and give some managers and some supervisors and, team leaders, directors, et cetera, out there, some good guidance in that area. Cause I think that's a tough one sometimes, is figuring out how you're going to lay those assignments out. Hank, what's your favorite way to listen to the show? And what do you want everybody to know about engaging with Beyond Clean if they're not already getting their voice out there?
Well, the best way to listen to us, Justin, is the Beyond Clean mobile app. I mean, how many podcasts out there got their mobile app for Android? And, for us cool people, it's on the Apple as well. And if you don't want to download the mobile app, that's fine. You can tune into us, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all the fun ones out there. But it's episodes like these that just really spark creativity. So we want to hear what you think about it in the review section. Give us a 5-star rating, and then drop that golden nugget and that inspiration that you said, man, Beyond Clean just changed my life. Make sure to follow us on all the social media channels. We're all over LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And outside of that, what else do we
Well, I'll tell you what, if you loved this episode, find the write-up. Like you said, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook, but find this write-up and share it out there. Don't just comment on the post. Tell others, because they might have missed the episode, or they might, not have had time to fit it in. And then if you share it out and say, boy, this really made a difference because I got to thinking about X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to start doing this tomorrow. I think that is the most impactful way to share and promote good information. So if our guest has said something that really gets you moving forward or doing something different, that's the best time to share the post for an episode, to make sure that others get that same insight and value that you did, and also get your personal touch and perspective on it, because they might listen to the same episode and not hear the same thing or not come to the same conclusions. It's the sharing of the information out there on social media that I think helps everybody really move forward, and it can really change the pace of play per se. And I think talking about getting these metrics and guiding decisions around staffing will get a lot of attention from the industry and lots of people outside of the sterile processing departments. This was a great episode for that. If you're a little more private and you want to share feedback with us, you can definitely send us an email to info@beyondclean.net. And on behalf of Hank and myself, thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond Clean.